Good morning.
Good morning, Sachi.
Today is Tuesday, April 9th, 2013. I'm speaking with Dr. Richard Thorn, a former president of one of the Institute of Technologies in Ireland and a former resident of the subcontinent. Dr. Thorn, what memories you have of this is for our partition project, and I understand you witnessed some of the tumultuous times, but your family was able to move from one place to another. So what kind of memories you have?
Okay, well, I was born in 1956 in London to an Irish mother and an English father. My father was a civil engineer, he's now dead. And very shortly after I was born, we spent a small amount of time back in Dublin. But then between 1957 and about 1966, I spent pretty much all of my time, short periods on holidays, living in either Nigeria, immediately post exit of the British, and in East Pakistan.
Where in East Pakistan?
Okay, we were based, we lived in East Pakistan. My recollection was for about 18 months to 2 years, and we lived in a number of places. I can recall at least 2 houses in Dhaka.
Dhaka,
yeah.
The capital city.
That's where we were based, yes. My father had been working for the Nigerian government, but he shifted to a contract in East Pakistan, which was he was working for a civil engineering company called Hagues and Associates, and then their responsibility was to develop irrigation systems in the delta.
Okay.
So that's why we were there.
So
in fact, it was 3. I recall. No, sorry, two homes living in Dhaka.
Did you go to school?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure.
Or homeschooled?
I was probably, for a lot of my time, up until I was about 8, I was homeschooled. Okay. Yes, and given that my mother had left school at 12, okay. You know, so it was challenging. Yeah. So yes, it was. I have a recollection of some schooling, but a lot of homeschooling, both in Nigeria and in East Pakistan.
So, did you get a chance to, any of you remember, socializing with the local Bengalis in East Pakistan?
Vividly, yes, on a variety of fronts. Obviously, we were expatriates, and there would have been an expectation that you would be a bit wealthier, that you would be required to take housekeepers and so on. So there would have been people working in the house. Distinctly remember being in markets. Over the weekend I bought a chicken here, and I recall buying a live chicken, and watching headless chickens running around the yard. So yes, so there was that contact. There was also contact because my father would regularly travel outside of Dhaka to sites, so he would bring us as small boys, myself and my brother. My sister came along a lot later. We would be out with him, so we would be regularly out and about as small boys. We also travelled. My father was a great believer, since he had the opportunity to work in different parts of the world, that when we took holidays, he would always do something different. So we travelled on one occasion during that 18 months. I recall spending some time in Shillong. Okay,
that's in India.
Yeah.
Assam then.
We would have travelled by train and boat and bus.
Okay. So
and on another occasion, we spent 3 weeks in Kathmandu.
Nepal.
In Nepal. So in terms of when this would have been, my recollection was 1963, 64, around about then. I've tried subsequently to tie it down through dates and passports and so on, but I can't tie it down exactly.
But were you ever affected? Because in 64, they were in Dhaka and other places in Bangladesh. There was a really pogrom against Hindus. A lot of Hindus were killed. Where was your family ever affected, or you were not aware of it?
Oh, we were definitely were. We would have been affected by events in a number of ways, and I'll come back to that one in a moment. We were affected at a personal level. I recall on one occasion my brother falling out of a tree and the arm was broken, it wasn't reset properly, and having to go to Calcutta. We went to Calcutta about once a month. Okay, so we would have crossed the border. Secondly, there was I know that cyclones are a big feature of that part of the Bay of Bengal, but there was one particularly horrendous one, I think in 1963, that I can recall vividly, very, very vividly, and there was just total destruction. And I can recall that as a child, spending a couple of days. On one occasion, we couldn't even get out of our beds. It was just horrendous. And then the final one was we were evacuated as expatriates. I'm not sure whether it was 63 or 64, probably 64, and we were taken by bus, closed windows, curtains drawn, to, I suspect it was a military airfield of some sort.
Okay.
We were definitely evacuated on Royal Air Force troop carriers because I remember the seats faced backwards, which is the case with military aircraft, and we were evacuated to Singapore.
Okay.
Myself, my brother, and my mother. We were put up in Singapore. It must have been courtesy of the British Embassy or something. Okay. And I remember waiting for my father, because my father would have been held back. So yes, so we were. Whereas I now understand the politics of what was happening in Nigeria, because we were also evacuated from during the Nigerian Civil War. Yes, yeah, we were in the Delta then, in Biafra, at that stage. But I never understood the politics of what was happening in India.
I mean, you really, in some sense, it's better not to be affected, so that you see world differently. Yeah. So you went to Singapore. Did your father join later?
Yes, my recollection is after 3 or 4 days, which must have been a worrying time for my mother. Yeah.
And what about, did you ever go back to Bangladesh?
No.
Pakistan?
No, we went back then to, my father had stopped working for the Nigerian government and had started to work for private companies. We went back to Nigeria.
Oh, from Singapore you went back to Nigeria?
I can't, we may have gone home for a short period, but we definitely ended up back for, my recollection was for about another year in Nigeria. His job at that stage was, he was a structural engineer. His job at that stage was I think he was site engineer on a gas-fired electric power station in the Delta. Okay,
in Nigeria.
In Nigeria,
But in East Pakistan, it was also similar. Irrigation.
Yes, irrigation. Yes. So he was a structural engineer. So the sorts of jobs he would have worked at all of his life were structural jobs. Roads, some buildings, but a lot of structural stuff.
Okay. Did you ever go back after you were older enough to the subcontinent?
No, and it's a curious thing that although as an academic and heads of institutions I've had a lot of opportunity to travel, I've never really had a huge urge to travel. Maybe it's because as a young boy I travelled quite a bit. I've travelled a lot in connection with work and family and so on, but I've never been back to that part of Asia.
All right. All right, we are almost coming to the end. What do you think, knowing now, being in Ireland, being in divided Ireland, what do you think you have opinion about India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and this division?
What I find curious, and maybe it's naivety, what I find curious is that for so long, three main ethnic groups could live in such harmony. Muslims, Christians, Hindus, and yet over a relatively short period of time since the 1960s, the rise of fundamentalism has meant that those centuries-old good relationships have started to fracture, and I don't understand that.
Yeah. It's quite complex, and of course, one can argue part of that had to be with the establishment by the British of a Muslim League party and advocating separation of two religions, and finally it took an institutional route, because you have a foreign power whose lives are not affected. They can draw the line.
Yeah.
And so, and once you do that, it's institutionalized.
Yeah.
And the tolerance that you have had before with different groups of people, you do not seem to be.
Yeah. Yeah, which is, I mean, I still, I mean, you can explain it, but I still don't understand. I don't understand it. You know.
That's not a good explanation.
Well, no, it's an explanation, and it's a logical explanation, but I still don't understand why, why people allow themselves to be caught like that.
Yes. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Let me see now. I do have very, very vivid memories of my time there. There would have been, I suppose, a lot of cricket played. My father was a passionate cricket fan, being an Englishman, so wherever we went he would start up a cricket club. Interestingly, there was also rugby played by the expatriates. So my father would sometimes claim that he would claim he was an international rugby player, and he would do it with a smile on his face, and then very quietly he'd say he played for East Pakistan.
That's nice. Good memory.
So my memories of the travel were just phenomenal. I mean, at that stage, Nepal had only really opened up to Westerners in the late 1950s, so this is the early 1960s, so very vivid memories before it opened up to trekkers and commercial Everest expeditions, very vivid. And I still can recall thinking I could see why the tea planters and the British Raj would move to a place like Shillong in the hot season. Yes, because it was just Shangri-La. It really just was. I still recall it.
They called it Scottish Hills of Assam.
And I can recall seeing why now. I recall the journey there was quite a long journey, because there must have been after floods. There was bridges down which meant we had to cross by boat. So you couldn't get a road or rail the whole way, and then the last up into the foothills was on a local bus and driven, I think, by a lad who looked about 16 years of age, and my parents being very worried that
holding their breath.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.